Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
So this is going to be kind of a little bonus episode. And I wanted to talk, like you and I touched on this, what was it? The week before Christmas on that podcast or I don't know, one of those weeks. And we started talking a little bit about our journey and burnout. And then I had an OSAP meeting, like committee member meeting, and they reminded me that they put out another issue of their journal. So if you go to osap.org, they have a journal. And I went back and I was looking at it, and their first journal talks about burnout, professional burnout. And I have always thought that was interesting because they're infection control, right? They're, employee safety. They're not
right.
OSHA guys. They're OSAP, but it is a group that is there to answer our questions and push out the new information and guidelines and recommendations. And they're talking about burnout. And I was like, what in the world is this thing going to be talking about? Like, it just doesn't fit to me at first. But what I found so interesting is that when you get professional burnout, you don't go to as many CEs, you stop kind of caring, and infection control breaches happen. You start getting into that, well, it's not my, not my circus, not my monkeys kind of thing. Like, I'm gonna clock in, clock out, I'm leaving, I don't care. I'm just going to, brush it under the rug because they don't pay me enough to care. Like you start getting, like your mind goes in that direction, right?
Right.
Infection control breaches happen quite often when you have professional burnout. Patient safety breaches happen when you have burnout. And I don't know, it just kind of got me on the path of like thinking back and we did mention, like, I have not enjoyed my personal growth. I am enjoying my personal growth of 2019 now, but it's been a very uncomfortable, icky feeling. And the last time I felt that icky feeling was when I was having some professional burnout in my practice. And you said you have also had it, but I don't think I know your story.
Yeah, I mean, and we can get into that in just a minute, but it's interesting that you mentioned though, or that I guess OSAP mentioned that when you are feeling burnt out, you're doing less CE, because for me, it's like, that's what gets me more interested. It gets me past that burnout. It gets me beyond the whatever's going on.
Frustration.
Right now. Yeah. So that's interesting. It's interesting that you just kind of shut down emotionally, like through everything, and can't summon the strength or the desire to do more.
Well, when I had my burnout the first time, I was actually in getting my bachelor's degree, and I had a real big falling out with my office, and I felt like I picked the wrong profession. I absolutely picked the wrong profession. Like, I can't believe that this is what I chose to do. Why didn't I go do nursing? Why wasn't I a PA? Why wasn't I a nurse practitioner?
And how many times do we see that on the boards, by the way? The hygiene boards, right? Always.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so I even started looking at that. I was like, do I stop my bachelor's in health science right now and go to PA school? Do I go to nurse practice? Like, what do I do? Because I cannot be under the thumb of these dentists anymore. I just cannot be. But I was getting the education then. And my response to that was like I just need to go get more education. Like, I just need to be smarter at this. And then along the way, I learned about personality types and like what I needed to do. And it was just answering a lot of the frustrations, and I could navigate out of that, like, paper bag, like when you feel like there's nothing but darkness and there's no way out, like the education, the information, the networking is what got me out of it.
So I feel like the way that you experience burnout, maybe one of the ways, or maybe it is the way, because I don't know if I just necessarily felt the same way, but it sounds like you're saying you felt trapped by your decision making, by the people you were working with.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that you were feeling though? Or is that how burnout manifests for you?
That's an interesting question. I might need to sit on that. I think
Sorry.
just historically, yes. I think when I'm not a person that leaves things quickly, right? Like I need to work every avenue out. Like okay, this isn't working, like, but I can endure. Like I'll endure this frustration because as long as I know that there's a why, like that person's behaving like this because of this particular why, I'm like, okay, I can work around that. I can move past it. But if I can't find an answer, like a logical answer to my, like what's frustrating me, I can't move past it. And then I leave. But when I leave things, relationships, friendships, jobs, like I know that I have tested every which way to make this good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I leave.
Do you feel like you had physical manifestations of burnout?
Oh, yeah. Like the losing sleep, not wanting to eat, just no energy, crying, like such. I would go one particular job, I would be like, they're not going to get me down. They're not going to get me down. They're not going to get me down. Like pep talking my way. And then when I got there, it was like one thing they said, I'm like, I would be sad. I'd be frustrated. I was just complaining all the time. Like none of that is attractive and no one wants to be around that. But I could not stop it because I was in such a bad place in those two separate times, like two practices.
Interesting. I feel like for like kind of my burnout is an interesting thing because I feel like I might have experienced it twice. I feel like the first time, rather than feeling trapped, I felt isolated.
Oh.
And I felt kind of more of alone. So let me kind of recap for the listeners who haven't listened to me and my story in a while, kind of where I came from. So, I have both my parents are super smart people. My dad said, hey, you guys need to go into healthcare, but I never really had a drive necessarily to be in a particular field. So I had watched MASH. I wanted to be a thoracic surgeon. I wanted to be sarcastic, funny, but also the very, very, very best one there that was saving lives all the time, that took all the complicated cases. That was just it. I wanted to be Hawkeye. So I said, okay, well, that's probably going to be the field that I want to go to. But my brother was like, look, I want to go into dentistry. I want to be a periodontist. I want to do this. I want to do that. And we were given some advice from a dentist who said, hey, look, maybe dental hygiene is a way you could go because the hygienists are constantly graduating at the top of the class. They are among the smartest. They're the best. They know the lingo, blah, blah, blah. And what I wasn't really understanding, I think at the time, and because I was just an uneducated person, well, that's going to be 4 years out of my life that I would not get back. And it doesn't work towards being a dentist, which I didn't realize that ahead of time. And so I did also feel a little bit stuck. Like I had picked this profession and I didn't mind being a hygienist, but I felt like this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I felt like no one else quite understood it because every other hygienist I had been around was like, oh, I had this amazing hygienist when I was 13 years old who took me under her wing and she was the best. And I just really looked up to her. And then I was a dental assistant and I worked with her and she was just so good with her patients. And then like that whole story that we've heard, I don't know how many times, I never had one of those stories. I was not motivated by a lot of the things that I'm motivated now, getting people healthy in the way that only a hygienist can get people healthy. I never realized that was a possibility because, again, as we talked about in the other episode, my understanding of what a hygienist was very limited still to the mechanical motions of, scraping teeth and, it wasn't even biofilm management. It was calculus removal. Like that was what I thought we did. Even though I'm a restorative hygienist doing shots and fillings all the time, it's still a very mechanical process. And so after doing it for several years, and I was kind of in a job where, I wasn't making great money. It was paycheck to paycheck. It was clock out if you didn't have a patient. It was, and let me be very clear about that because it wasn't clock out between patients. It was take a long lunch, go home early. Like those are the two things, which I think are important distinguishers because I was never asked to stick around in case a patient showed up. So that was okay. But I was just why does no one else feel the same way I do about what we're doing? Like, why am I by myself? No one I could talk to felt the same way. Or if they did, they wouldn't admit it. And so for me, I was like, well, I need to do more. And I had done a mission trip to the Philippines, which I talked about several times, when I was 19 to 21. And that changed my life because I was able to help people. I learned a new language. I learned a new culture. I learned all of these different things for the couple of years I was there. And so I'm like, well, maybe world travel is going to be my thing. But if I can do world travel and help people using my dental skills. And so that's kind of like how I overcame the initial feeling of being burned out. But also, I did a job change, and I think that really helped. I don't think my job that I was in was like an abusive environment or whatever. I think that there were definitely some things that we'd all like to change in our offices, but I think that I was valued. I think that I think I might have been underutilized a little bit. So yeah. So that was my first little burnout story.
Well, it's interesting because after doing a lot of this growth in 2019, like I've done a lot of assessments, strength finders, Corey's podcast that we did, where I did the TTI assessment and like really understanding my drivers. I look back on my burnout and I'm like, freaking course, I was burned out. None of it filled me up. All of it challenged my whys and how I get there. I really see now, like my heart is in education and in public health. It's not the numbers. It's not the business of dentistry. It's not the meeting goals. I could care less about a CDT code. I know why we use CD codes. I think that even from a data perspective, I can appreciate that to make sure we're calling, apple and apple and tracking apples in that office. Like that makes sense to me. But if you're telling me that because of like reimbursement or, we need to make this production goal, like none of that fills me up at all. And a lot of my offices were in affluent areas of perio. Like you have to have the money to be able to go do it. And they were fee for service too. And so I would see a lot of need and we couldn't do anything about it, or at least I couldn't do anything about it because they didn't have the money. And I also was in a few practices that challenged my ethics. They challenged what I felt was right. And they challenged my scope of practice in a lot of ways without any care in the world. And all of those things do not sit well with me. And I see that like it makes complete sense why I would have been burned out, because I was not getting what fills me up.
And like you're just like spinning your wheels, trying to make it work because that's how you are. You want to try and see every little possible way to justify that this is going to work out, that this is going to be the thing that fills me up, and it just never is. No. Even though, interestingly, you already knew that, because what did you take your master's in?
Dental hygiene education.
Huh.
But surprisingly, my thesis was more in public health. Yeah. And it was very interesting how you how that happened. Like I'm going to teach in a dental hygiene program. Like that's what I want to do for the long term. I've always been very good at like hands-on. Like that's what even in hygiene school, like I saw one of my friends in Vegas when we were at Dent Supply Serona, and she was like, I knew you would always do something like this. Like this has you written all over it. And at 20 years old, like, when we were studying for an exam, it was like me cramming, like, let me get this in. And then when we'd have our study group, I was like, all right, I'm going to teach you guys about this. Like, and that's how our study group ran. Like it was, let me wrap my head around it and see if I can teach it to you. And if it makes sense, then I get it. I get it enough for my test. And then you also learn too. So that was always, that was how I learned in hygiene school.
Did I ever tell you that that's how Mike and I studied?
No.
That's funny that we have that in common. So, being a 20, gosh, I want to say I was 24, probably when I went to hygiene school. Mike was 27. So we weren't like old, but we're older than a lot of the other people that were there. And so we were both married. I had a newly married young child. And then I think Allison was pregnant the second year. So young family. And, optics are an interesting thing. And so we had to be very, very careful about, were we calling someone at 11:30 at night to study that was a 20-something-year-old single girl and that had traveled, away from home and, all these different things. And so Mike and I decided that we just want to be very careful. We're just going to study with each other. We'll be study partners because we were in hygiene school the same year, same everything. And so we would stay up until, midnight or whatever. And it was always me quizzing him 100% of the time, me making up all the questions, me teaching principles. When he didn't get it, we'd say, okay, well, why don't you get it? Let's dissect this thing. Let's make it work. When he struggled in a couple of areas kind of after school, then like after we had graduated, then it was me and him doing like hands-on thing. Let me show you how this is. Remember this principle. Let's do this. And it was just, I feel like, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Mike because I think that's how he learns. He likes to hear it from multiple different angles. The instructor told it, he read it in the book, and now he's going to hear it one more time from someone he trusts. And so it was just, that's interesting that we have that in common.
I know. That is very interesting. And I'm surprised you didn't go back to teach then, because that's obviously what I did, was go back and teach in a dental hygiene program.
I think that would have been too limiting for me. And I don't mean to take anything away from instructors, but I understand the powers at play with institutionalized education. And I think I would have been very frustrated. It's very similar to like, why wouldn't I go in the military? I love discipline and all that. If someone's wrong though, I would have a hard time letting them tell me that I'm wrong and knowing the truth and not being able to do it, like being powerless to be able to show them and teach them that they're wrong actually.
That's very astute of you, because I also have that struggle, but I did not see that going into a lot of things. And I am a squeaky wheel if there ever was one. And so I piss off a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't know. I don't get the hierarchy. I don't respect it sometimes. I'm like, but you're wrong. And let me give you all the research why you're wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't respect that hierarchy. And it has gotten me in trouble a lot, especially in an institute like dental hygiene education.
I think, I grew up in organized religion that definitely had a hierarchy. And then, I was in retail before I went to hygiene. And so I get management structures and stuff, I think at a different level. But I wanted to tell you about the second time of feeling burnout. Because I think that this one is a little bit more along the lines of what a lot of people are currently feeling. It wasn't so much like, the job was fine, all that kind of stuff, but it was the bullying that happens that can, you were talking about, maybe not getting, get along with your coworkers or whatever. And the funny thing is, like, I feel as much of an educator as I like to be with everyone else, I didn't feel the burnout at first, but after years of trying to get everyone to follow company policy and corporate policy and things like that, it was getting really, really daunting and really, really frustrating for people to get mad at me for just doing what the company told me to do. And then you get into this, you're the middle person, right? So corporate tells you to do something, or your owner doctor tells you to do something, you pass that on to whether it's, the people that handle the insurance or the treatment coordinator or whoever you have in your office that's kind of in between you and them. And you're passing on this information, and they just get frustrated, and then they get mad at you, and then they start talking smack about you. And it does go back to being isolated again, though. Because when you have enough people in the office talking so much smack about you all the time, and all you're focused on is just go in, do the work and leave, come back to the podcast, do other stuff that you have at nighttime, do the family, I have all these things in life that I'm really focused on, that my day job and stuff gets really like you really start to hate being there. You really start to hate, and you feel the burnout. You feel I'm going to have lunch by myself because no one wants to talk to me. I'm going to go do this because no one, wants to be around me, or they're going to, talk badly about me or make fun of me or whatever. And then of course, we have new people that we hire on, and then those people end up hearing about, how terrible of a person you are.
Yeah.
And so, by the time that things actually get, really discussed, like it's too far gone, and that it's too far gone, that no matter what you say, no one has any proof. It's all hearsay. No matter what you say, there's no chance for you to feel vindicated or feel like all you did was the right thing all along, because there's just too many angry, insecure people. And so that was like the second time I really started feeling a lot of burnout, and it was, it's tough. It's tough to get through. And I really wish that at that point I had a solution. Before I did international mission trips, that's what got me through it. But the second time, like I didn't really have anything. I don't have a solution for it. You just kind of work it out and stay true to yourself, and eventually it just gets better.
Do you feel like if you had communication tools that to confront the problems, the gossiping, or do you feel like once there becomes this herd-like mentality that there is tackling it with one person who's kind of getting beaten up on, it doesn't matter what kind of communication tools you have, you can't combat that?
I honestly don't think that it's ever a lost cause. Truthfully,
that's a good point.
Just okay. So you gotta listen to my experiences. Like, there was a time when I was managing 20 people, and things weren't always great. And what would happen in that particular big group situation is that, one person would feel like they're getting beat up. What needs to happen is transparency and honesty and communication. And we talk about communication skills. I don't probably know the right terms for it, but everyone needs to sit in a room and everyone needs to talk it out. And then everyone needs to just go on with their lives. And there needs to be some accountability though, too, for the people that continue to bring up the past.
Yeah.
So if people are constantly worrying about something you did a year ago, a year and a half ago, that person maybe doesn't need to be part of this bigger group anymore, because they continue to like tear down the goodwill that continually gets brought up. But the problem is, like, in a situation like mine and many hygienists out there, you got to remember that we are very much in the middle of everything. We're never going to be upper management, and we're never going to be kind of like the low person on the totem pole. And so that's a hard thing to force that type of communication when you are that middle person. But I think you're right. I think if everyone had the proper tools of communication and they were in an environment that facilitated communication, then I think that there was a lot of promise there. And I think that a lot of it's just, I do think a lot of it is miscommunication or misunderstanding. I think,
yes,
one of the things that I've been accused of, and this is independent of, the burnout situation, but just in life, is that, my face, right? Like, I'm not paying attention. I'm not doing whatever. And you and I have talked about this on the podcast. Like, well, I have to take notes so that, I retain things, or sometimes it looks like I'm just like, my brain's going a million miles an hour, but my face is dead, Well, one of the things I do is I just raise my eyebrows like that. When I'm listening to the words that you're saying, I'm like following along, something I learned in the Philippines.
I was going to say, it's very cultural.
Very cultural. I don't know I do it. It was something I learned when I was, a 20-something-year-old. And so it's very interesting that was something that got brought up, is like, I never look like I'm paying attention, but I'm making my eyebrows, and people are like, what are you doing with your eyebrows? Like, that's how I show that I'm paying attention. So I think if someone was to ask me about that specifically, like, look, I feel like you don't listen to me when I talk to you, and you have this little dead face. I would love to be able to talk to them and be like, well, you can tell, like, here's some things that you can tell if I'm really paying attention or not. Am I blinking or am I staring? Because like, I had one office manager one time, she's like, you got to blink it in. And that means you're paying attention. Are my eyebrows moving? Am I breathing through my nose or my mouth? Those are interesting things. So anyway. I know these are like long, weird, and look, I don't want this to be like a sad want kind of thing, but I feel like a lot of people go through this. And I feel like, I think that we got to communicate. Like we have to be allowed an environment where if someone feels hurt, to address those situations. I've never had a situation where I've sat down and had a conversation and talked it out with somebody that even me and you, how many times have we just this year had to have sit down conversations? And I can think of one time maybe that you really pissed me off that I can't do this right now.
Yeah.
Right. But almost every other time we talked it out, and even that time we got over it really quickly, but we had to have those communications so that we could continue to be, the best friends that we are today. So,
right. And the thing about bullying too, because I've been on both sides of it, and I've been called a bully without the intention of bullying, but because I am here it is. These are my thoughts. I have no filter. I say it. My delivery sucks sometimes. I can absolutely admit that, and if there are people that are very sensitive and see me as a little aggressive, it can be seen as bullying. And a lot of times it's just like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. That does not follow like infection control standards. So no.
Right.
And that's my delivery. And that seems like I am bullying the people. And in my mind, I'm like, no, because I'm actually protecting the patient. And so I do get aggressive in those ways, because if I think patients aren't getting the proper care, I get very militant about things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've definitely been called a bully before without the intention, and never have I gotten off on like being like the leader and like I boss everyone. Look at all the people that I can control. Like that has never been the case. So yes, I am working on my delivery in a lot of ways because I don't want to be seen as that bully. And I have been bullied by like the doctor. And when you said isolated, that is one thing I kind of had forgotten about, because when I went into my last practice, I was the only hygienist, 2 assistants, front office, and the dentist. And we were all female. And I was the only hygienist. And like you said, that we're always at the middle management, right? Like, we're not working side by side by the doctor, so we don't always get the value from the assistants and the doctor. The front office is like, make that money, pack that schedule. Like, I got in trouble for not getting my instruments out of the sink in time for the assistants. And I'm like, I got 2 rooms and a full schedule. There's 2 of you. Like, what? And feeling just very isolated. And then those walls would go up, and the contention between the assistants and the hygienists were there. And there was quite a few times where we would joke that our boss would like bully each, like you could feel when it shifted towards you. And it was a joke like, oh, well, this is the day. Thank God it's moved to you. I'm going to go get some coffee now, because she's not going to be on my ass like constantly.
Right,
and you could feel it. And I was saying like at the very end of this work environment, like before I like left, I feel like she would slap me around in front of the patient. And then at the end of the day, be like, you do such a great job. Like we've never had a hygienist that is as good as you. I was thinking about getting you a saddle stool. And it's like, you can't slap me around and buy me pretty things at the end of the day. Like that's not how this is going to work.
I'm going to stop you for a quick second about this. I would like to kind of dive into more about what the things that she was saying to you during the patient exam part that you felt like, because the only reason why I bring this up is because when you say I've been a bully, and I would say blah, 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 very direct, yada, yada. And then now you're using words like she slapped me around.
Yeah.
Because that's your perception of what was happening. But to her, so what was she saying to you?
It was more of like, all right. So she was quite, I fit well into this office too, because there was, and it's so funny because I just went into an office to give some samples from Tepe, and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe you worked there and you lasted that long. And I was like, well, I mean, there were some really good things there. She made me an excellent clinician because she stayed on me. Like, there wasn't a moment where I didn't have like anxiety like I did back in school, getting up and having her come check my patient, because she was going to be like, you left
overly critical.
Overly. She was also a hygienist before she became a dentist. So I always felt like I was in school, like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Like, you left a spicule of calculus on the, root surface of 5 meters of exposure. Like, aggressive cases, 99.9% improvement than when they came in the door, but would make me, Michelle, you missed this piece in front of the patient. I would get that before they leave. And so then I got to glove up, put my mask on, put my goggle, my loops back on, sit back down. And sometimes it was hypercalcification. I'm like, ugh.
Been there before. Yeah, yes. For sure.
Because she knew there was, if there was room for me to learn, yes. I think there's just certain ways that you can deliver the information. Like, consistently, Michelle, I see that you are like leaving, I don't know, the mesial or distal lingual. You're missing that one all the time on 19. What do we need to do? Like, what can I do to help you adequately access that area? And saying that in an environment where it's like, okay, I didn't realize that. Let me try to do better about that. Like, if there was a way for me to learn, grow, make it. We also got in an argument all the time about letting the patient have accountability, like in their home care. She's like, get in there and you need to do scaling and root planing. I'm like, there's no calculus to root plane. Like, this is a home care situation. They just told me that they were depressed. They have, not been taking care of themselves. They have, not getting a lot of sleep. They've been snacking a bunch. This is a home care situation. This is not a scaling and root planing kind of situation.
Right.
But just shaming me in front of the patient because I didn't take that option as a, what I should do that day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, she would do things like we barrier wrapped everything. And so if I remember a very specific time, when you put the sticky across the buttons on the pull unit, you can go up and down. I had placed it like quickly and you couldn't see, like the edges weren't hanging over. They were just kind of perfectly on there. And she like sat the patient up and she's like, I won't see this patient without proper barriers, Michelle. And I was like, what did I miss? Like, and she's like, right here. And I was like, and I like just flicked the paper and she's like, oh. And then like sits the patient back down. It's like those kind of things were happening a lot. And then at the end of the day, being like, you're just the hardest worker. You do such a good job for your patients. Like, man, we haven't had patients this healthy ever. I'm like, you berated me in front of every single patient today. Like, I can't.
And I think it's interesting, like, again, speaking to this bully issue, a lot of it's where did we come from and what have our life experiences given us?
This is true. You're right.
To perceive different things. So if you are a 55-year-old person having lived in the Northeast for your whole life, it might be different than a 23-year-old who's lived in Southern California your whole life. And so when those two personalities combine, whether one's a doctor or one's one of the auxiliary staff, or even hygiene to hygiene or doctor to doctor, whatever, like your communication style is going to be a little bit different. I remember one time we have a very big Russian and Ukrainian population where we live. Okay. And I remember one of the staff members commenting about how angry the people sounded. And actually, there was another time too, is I remember I had a doctor that I was working with who he was Vietnamese, and he was talking to his brother on a cell phone in the office. And I'd walked into the office to say, "Hey, doctor, I'm ready." And I feel like I've said this story now that I'm saying it into a microphone, like I've said it out loud before, but like he was saying his words. And like in the United States, we say like, there's like a cadence when you're like, okay, all right, bye. Like, yeah, the da, 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 da. And he was like just saying his words, and then cause he had a flip phone, snapped his phone shut. And I'm like, did you even say goodbye to your brother? And he's like, no. I was like, that's so rude. That's so whatever. Like I would never, unless I was mad at somebody, snap my flip phone shut on them. But for him, it was no big deal. Or for, the sound of harsh language. But to them, it's not. To them, it's perfectly natural. So if I had a, maybe Russian born dentist that was working with me, and they continued that same kind of like the way they speak Russian into English, it might come off as very aggressive or very harsh or very, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, the whole point of that is I feel like, for me, like when I'm working with a difficult doctor, I just try and learn what they want me to do and just do my very best. And if I can't meet their expectations, oh, well, I did my best. Either I'll move on or they'll move on. Someone's going to move on eventually.
I hear what you're saying. I think you're saying like, I felt bullied, which I do think too. I might need to change my verbiage on that because I do think that bullying happens. And Joy Boyd Holmes has said that her child, her 19-year-old said this, right? Her. That you feel bullied when you allow the bullying, right? Like you can only allow it. If you don't allow it, you can't be bullied. And I think that that's true to a certain extent, right? Unless you just are beat.
I think when it comes to tones and facial things and stuff like that, yes. I think that you're absolutely right that those types of soft skills that aren't developed are completely in control of the person that's perceiving the bullying.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, I think what I was feeling wasn't so much being bullied, but it was being micromanaged and undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
And that
I absolutely think, yeah.
Yeah.
I
and
feel
that
like
doesn't allow me to grow and be creative.
I feel like that doctor really did value you. And like, I don't know her, but maybe I'm wrong. They might've been just trying to brainwash you at the end of the day. So you show up the next day. I don't know, but, I feel like that they just lack the ability to discuss things with you in front of a patient, but knew how valuable you were and didn't want to lose you. And so tried to make up for their, poor mistakes that they made during the day at the very end of the night. But I think the difference would be is if someone is constantly making fun of you and trying to rally other people into not liking you.
That's awesome.
And making up lies and stories about you. That is not a perception. That is a real thing. And that's what I think bullying is.
That's true. There was a lot of that too. She was the queen of talking behind your back. Like you couldn't go and get.
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah.
Like for instance, an assistant, when I first started there, she was very sensitive. Such a hard, caring, loving worker. Like she wanted to mother you. But maybe like there were some moments when she would clean my room, which was like, so appreciated because I was going between two rooms by myself. And I noticed the infection control wasn't great. And so I went to my doctor as the leader and said, how do I approach this with her? Because I don't want to hurt her feelings.
Right.
She circled back around and told her that I was saying that her infection control wasn't really good. And so that assistant was very upset with me. And I was like, I wasn't going to rat you out. Like, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Like, that was what I was trying to do. And so there was a lot of that happening, going behind your back. You couldn't, but they were the leader. And so what else are you supposed to do? But eventually we found a way. We're like, we don't need her. Like, if I got something to say to you, I'm going to say it to your face because obviously it's going to get to you.
Right. So forced to communicate with each other. Oh my gosh. Heaven forbid.
And I will say, we have had one of the assistants that I used to work with. We were both very strong personalities. There were a lot of contentious moments, and I was angry with her a lot. And it was fed by the leader of the practice, the dentist. And in hindsight, and I've said this to her, and she's actually reached out to me. She listens to the podcast. In hindsight, she was such a hard worker, and I could see where her attitude came from the micromanaging. It came from the being undervalued and then also pitting us against each other. There was a lot of that, like puppet master, like, let me give this to Michelle and then she'll lose her mind because that's her personality.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that.
That's very disgusting. And I think that kind of rounding off this discussion, though, is when these types of situations occur, burnout ends up going like exponentially, right? Because you're so emotionally tied to your patients, to your work, to your coworkers, to all of these different things. And if you feel like you're constantly being expending too much emotional energy in these little situations, then you're like, look, well, I don't have any more emotional energy to give. I'm done. And you stop caring and you stop feeling and you stop doing all of those things.
That's a good point too, because I just read an article because I have a Google alert on dental hygienist. And in that they said, dental hygienist is such a great job because you can just clock out and leave it there. No worries, no emotional baggage, just so easy. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Come on. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, the emotional baggage that you take with your patients or you have with your patients, like, you worry about them. You see the kid that's maybe getting abused. You see the husband and wife that, aren't taking care of their kids and they're always got cavities, or you diagnose somebody with cancer, oral cancer, or, you just can't get to that one patient. And then you couple that with the environment that isn't always positive and is also emotionally draining. Like, it's a wonder that it doesn't happen faster and more often in our profession.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. I think that, the times that I've had less like burnout-y type feelings is, I think they have been times when I have felt that everyone understood their role within the practice. And that allowed me to focus on my patient and only my patient, and not any of the external stuff. Like, yeah, I can clean my room. I can do all that kind of stuff too. I can do my parachart. I can do all that stuff. I don't mind doing that kind of stuff. But when it's, when all of the other external factors are starting to kind of play mind games and stuff like that, and I lose control of just focusing on my patient's care, I feel like, and maybe look, this is maybe just me and no other hygienist feels this way, but I feel like that's when the burnout starts to creep back in, until we sort of get some sort of equilibrium of they're handling all of the stuff that needs to be handled outside of the op, and allowing me and the doctor to do our, co-diagnosing as providers and getting these patients like that, the best care within our scope of practice and within our abilities.
I think it's interesting that both you and I have answered burnout with education, though. And I don't know if that's us and that's our personality type, or if that is really the answer. But I do feel strongly for a lot of people that if something is truly bothering you, learning how to deal with it, learning how to overcome it. If you are like always getting beat up on because you don't place proper sealants, like getting the education, getting, like the CE, and not just like the scientific CE, like I know perio, I can scale like subgingival, not that kind of stuff, but like overall, like for me, I hate the business side of it. I do. I really, really, really do. But because I've learned so much on this podcast, I can appreciate it and I can get on board. But I know now, like, being in an environment that's like constantly measuring my metrics would just crush me as a clinician.
Can I say something though that you've taught me about, and it's going to come off as I'm trying to correct you, and I don't mean to correct you, but you're saying taking CE, but you've shown me over the last several years that even if a course doesn't satisfy CE, it still counts as education. And I should still value that and invest in that. That's something I learned from you. So if you didn't hear the bigger message of what she was saying, I feel like it's not even necessarily because like I think Sarah says it sometimes, Sarah Thiel, about how ergonomics doesn't apply for your state. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't take an ergonomics course because it doesn't satisfy your CE requirements. It's still pertinent education to your development, and something that's going to keep you safe. If you've already satisfied your infection control components for your license, still take more.
Yeah.
There's nothing like, I feel like that any education that you're passionate about, even if it doesn't satisfy whatever state requirements, whatever, I feel like that's going to really help you prevent burnout as well.
And, the reason that we started this podcast was because, well, for me, I got out of my bubble of Charleston, South Carolina. I had at that point only gone to one national meeting. I had only gone to my state meeting. And so I was only hearing what they would bring to me, right? Like someone was having to bring this to me. I wasn't seeking it. I was checking off those CE boxes. I was an, voracious reader of content. I've always been like subscribing to the magazines and reading all the articles and tearing out like products and like trying to figure out like how this would apply to my patient. Like that has always been my nature, the curiosity of it. But from a CE perspective, I was only going to my state meeting or getting the self-study CE, right? From the magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that we kind of started this podcast was because we were hearing amazing content all over. And we both knew that if we didn't attend that one particular meeting, if we didn't go to RDH that 1 year, we might not ever hear that message. And that might be that nugget of info that changed everything for us.
Yep.
Yep. And so that is, I didn't realize that was something that I've preached on about. But if you aren't getting outside of that bubble, that local CE, your state CE, you are missing out on a lot of information. And I think that just perpetuates frustration because you can't get to it. Right. And so that's why we did this podcast.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know this is kind of like a weird, like random, us just chit chatting, but I like, it's funny that we've done this for this long, but we haven't talked about like our personal experiences and I appreciate the feedback because I might change my words and say like, not necessarily wish I being bullied in that particular way, but I felt very micromanaged and it really made me feel like I wasn't doing the best for my patients when that is always my goal number one. And to, feel that like from the leadership, it feels like you're being bullied, but maybe that's not the best word.
For sure. Yeah. I get to it. I think we get what you're saying because like it's happened to all of us and we feel in the moment exactly what you're saying. And that's
like,
the hard
get
part.
off my job, as Bethany Frankel would say. Get off my job. Like, let me do what I know how to do. And on that note,
as we lighten it back up after this very kind of serious,
heavy.
Oh my gosh, that was a very serious one for a little bit. I even felt like I was speaking like whispery almost. Like, am I allowed to be talking about this kind of stuff? Am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to get fired?
But no one talks about it. And even though, social media, I get it. It's fine. I'm also coming off of a real special Facebook rant about me personally. I think I still feel very strongly that when you vent on social media, when you vent to people, like you just held me accountable for the words. Like you did. Like you did exactly what people should be doing.
Hopefully out of love, though. Hopefully.
Yes. Hopefully. Well, yeah, exactly. Very true. Like this is a very safe environment. So I don't feel like you're just kind of fighting me to fight me. But when if I had just said like I was bullied and you just like compounded that, like, yeah, you were bullied, what a bitch, like all these things.
Right.
Like,
right.
That just perpetuated in my mind, like yeah, I was bullied. But now to look back on it, we're like, okay, I just maybe need to change it because these were the feelings that I was actually having. And that doesn't happen on social media. We double down, we become little sheeple. It perpetuates the bad, like, your perception. It's just perpetuating that perception versus labeling what you're feeling, labeling the emotions that are running through your head, and how do you get out of that? So I don't think venting on Facebook is a good thing. And I'm sorry, I don't. Unless you're going to have those people that are going to be like, well, let's talk about it, because you like laying it out there like, oh, I feel better. You only feel better for a moment. And that's not my opinion. That's psychology. Like, go look it up.
Right.
That is a psychological phenomenon that we get this herd like mentality, this group think, and it's not safe and it's not good. And it actually hurts our little brains in the long haul.
And I think in the world, historically, we've seen some really bad atrocities happen with, groupthink mentality when it's been at its most evil. So yeah, you're right. You definitely need to be very, very careful about that. And also, try and be a good friend, try and be someone who can, listen, because a lot of times too, I feel like I've messed up a lot in my life, and I don't feel like I've ever really been there. I feel like I've been that person that was like, oh man, you're right. That doctor, wow, what a punk. Like I've done that too. But I think that we need to be better friends than that to each other, and be friends in real life, in addition to, not gossip. There's a lot of good things we can do on social media, but you're right. That's not one of them. So
currently,
right,
I think Facebook is the porta potty of humanity, and I would like that to change.
Wow. I wish we had like Michelle-isms, like Carnival Cruise Line, floating Walmart, or whatever.
Floating Walmart.
Facebook, the porta potty of humanity. Like, we could probably sell those pretty good. Now Facebook would trash our algorithms so no one ever saw our posts anymore, but
that's such a good point.
Whatever.
Bleep that out.
All right.
So they don't find it in SEO.
They will too. We need to end this thing, because I just have a feeling there's storms going on. I'm going to lose power. I'm going to lose all of this. So I really don't want to, because this is really good. So,
okay. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We hope this helps somebody, or I don't know. I hope it helps somebody. That's it.
It helped me, Michelle, if it didn't help anyone else. But all right. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.
Bye, y'all.